And I raise that only because that's just a big fear, I think, that a lot of people have.
Why don't you think it will replace teachers? Hello, we are at the AI Engineer World's Fair, and I am with Shawn Jansepar from Khan Academy. Shawn is the Director of Engineering of AI and Learning and AI. Pretty broad title there, given Khan Academy is all about learning and starting to really have a lot of AI. I know Khan Academy has had AI tutorials in the form of, linear algebra for a while, and probably other types that I don't even know about. But I'm so excited to have you here. Thanks for sitting with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell me first a little bit about you and your background and how you got to Khan Academy.
Yeah, sure. So I was working at a startup in Vancouver, that's where I'm from, called Mobify, and it was great. I learned a ton. I was the director of engineering there, but I was kind of just getting this itch to do more in the education space. I was teaching at a coding boot camp for a little while, and then stopped doing that, and then had an opportunity to teach a course on web development at my old university, Stanford University. And then I was like, how do I do this? How do I do education without working 100 hours a week? And I found Khan Academy, and I'd been a huge fan of Sal and his TED Talks. And I saw that they had an engineering manager opening, and I just decided to apply. And that's how I got to Khan Academy. It was 7 years ago.
So I was going to say, how long? 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so Khan Academy, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit education platform started by Sal Khan, who, correct me if I'm wrong or fill in information gaps, he was just teaching on his own for fun, and it kind of branched into this big company, correct?
Yeah. I mean, he famously says that he was just, he was tutoring his cousins, and then more cousins wanted tutoring. So he recorded himself, and then his cousins preferred the digital version of their cousin over the real cousin. And that's kind of where he got this profound insight to, start the Khan Academy and build this platform with videos and self-paced practice. And he really kind of built that out a long, long time ago, and, has since built out a great team, and just a privilege to be a part of the journey.
Yeah, it's a great team, a great company. I'm curious about how you got into AI. So a lot of our audience is new to AI, perhaps non-technical, and they're interested in how do I break in? How do I be someone who is helpful in this industry, who can actually feel credible in this industry? And so I'm curious about your background, and if it wasn't technically an AI, how you got into it.
Yeah. So it's funny, I think a big theme of this conference has been what is an AI engineer?
Right.
And where does it kind of fit in within the stack? And, when I was in university, I took a couple AI classes. I didn't specialize in AI. And then at one point I took a Udacity course on machine learning. And so I dabbled into it, but I'm not someone who has an ML master's or anything like that. I spent most of my time, what I prefer is I kind of tend to just really doing full stack web development and kind of working backwards from customer needs and customer problems. And I love technology, but I also I actually play a dual product manager, engineering leader role. And so I love both of those worlds, and I kind of just, ultimately will gravitate towards whatever technology will solve the problem the best.
Amazing.
And when it came to large language models and AI, one of the reasons why we ended up even kind of approaching that wasn't because we wanted to do AI for AI's sake, but it was because when you think about what Sal Khan had built with his platform, really it was always meant to be this tool that emulated tutoring. It was just limited by the technology we had, self-paced practice, video. And we saw this LM technology, we just felt like this is really going to help us accelerate our roadmap towards a experience that can kind of emulate tutoring at scale. So I really just dove in when we started the partnership with OpenAI, learned how all the tech worked. We had some amazing people on our team, so I'm not the one building everything.
It's always a great team, usually behind something.
Yeah, for sure. I cannot.
And I'm sure you had a great impact as well.
Yeah,
as a director,
all of us. I think
it takes a village,
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful things that I had a chance to contribute was just really pushing for, hey, let's just dive in and start building some prototypes rather than kind of having this analysis paralysis. And ended up from there kind of diving into doing a prototype and as a joint venture with OpenAI.
Yes.
So we were kind of co-building prototypes together, and then we built something that felt really good, and we decided, hey, why don't we actually test this with some students? So we all kind of, a bunch of us flew down to Mountain View. There's a school called Khan Lab School, which is something that Sal runs. It's separate from Khan Academy, but it's like
school.
it's like a middle school, high school. And so we tested it with a bunch of students over there, and they really loved it. They were just kind of super impressed with it and asking it a ton of questions. One of the things that I remember being...
And this is the large language model for learning called Khanmigo.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're building the Khanmigo prototype, and I remember one of the action bubbles we added to the experience, something you could click on kind of that was just predefined, was like, why should I care about learning this? And like almost every student clicked on it. And it was just like, wow, okay, clearly we're not doing something in education where everyone is just like excited to like, oh, this is interesting. I wish I knew why I was learning this.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of this light bulb moment of like, hey, maybe we really have something here.
Wait, you're saying so everyone knew why they were learning it, or they didn't know why they were learning it?
Just they didn't know, like we actually
they
just
didn't know.
Yeah, they were like using Khan Academy, the platform.
Yeah.
We just said, hey, do your homework, but now we've enabled this chatbot.
Yes.
And one of the bubbles being like, why should I care about learning this? Everyone kind of gravitated towards like, oh, this is interesting. Like my teachers maybe don't give me the context as to like why this stuff's important. And that was just, that's one
learning, not about AI, but about whatever topic that they were
Yes.
interested in.
Yeah. Because the chatbot was kind of integrated into the content directly.
Yes, that's interesting.
Yeah. And so it was that plus them just like using it, experimenting it, really enjoying it, and having this AI deeply embedded in the content that we're working on.
Yes.
And they just really seemed to gravitate towards it. So we said, hey, maybe we have something here. Let's try to see if we can launch something alongside of the launch of GPT-4,
yes,
which was not unveiled yet.
Yeah.
ChatGPT had been unveiled by then, but GPT-4 hadn't been, announced and unveiled until March 2023. And so from there, after we built that prototype, we ended up doing what we called a Hack AI-a-thon, where we had the whole company building a bunch of AI-based prototypes for our AI tutor, as well as our AI teaching assistant. That's the teaching assistants run by an amazing other team. We built a bunch of prototypes from that hackathon, and then kind of selected the ones that felt the most viable to make it into our launch. In March, that's when we launched Khanmigo kind of officially.
So when you say you had this hackathon about were they different large language models for different topics? Is that what the hackathon was, or?
No, it was just building like features using the AI. So like things like essay kind of feedback tool that like comments on your essay and like gives you feedback on a bunch of different dimensions, or like we built activities like craft a story with the AI. So it was really just like giving the team a bunch of different ideas as to, like, initially it was started as this idea of like a Khanmigo, AI on the side in your content. But then there was a few ideas around like, what if we had a bunch of fun activities, chat with a historical figure, craft a story with the AI, kind of almost, you can kind of picture it like in the old school world of video games, and you buy a game console and you get like a demo disc of like 5 different previews of a game. That's kind of how we viewed the initial launch of our activities page. It's just like, let's try a whole bunch of really fun activities and kind of launch those with students and see how they react. And also teachers as well. We built a bunch of activities, things like, I think I mentioned like build a lesson plan, write an exit ticket, write a classroom newsletter, like things that are just going to save teachers time. And ultimately, like we really view I haven't clarified this, but we really view what we're building as not as a kind of replacement for teachers, but really just to help save a ton of time in the classroom, to really humanize the classroom so that teachers can spend more one-on-one time with students who need that extra help, or spend more time on project-based learning. Like we do not view this as a replacement by any means.
Definitely not. I mean, I find as an educator that large language models are so helpful, as you said, in lesson plan creation. It's crazy. And it can fill in, like, when you are thinking of a lesson plan, I wrote an outline on a whiteboard and took a photo of it and asked it to fill in anything that I was missing. And it was so spot on. And I didn't even have to, type it up. So it's just amazing.
And we're trying to kind of go beyond just that traditional chat-based interface. Maybe you'll paste in something and it'll kind of respond to you with like a repeat of your whole, lesson, but with maybe something added to the middle. Ours is like a full-fledged editor with the ability for the AI to code. And it's kind of more like tightly integrated educational experience.
I see.
I think there's this great quote I mentioned in my talk yesterday about Notion. The Notion CEO said that he views this as not just like a technological revolution, but really like an interface revolution.
AI is an interface revolution.
Yeah, like what generative AI brings to the table really kind of is going to revolutionize the way we even think about user interfaces.
Absolutely.
And he was kind of saying, well, we think we're great at user interfaces, and that's why Notion will be successful. And I think we kind of view it the same way at Khan Academy. We're really great at thinking about what problems are educators and students facing, and how do we just leverage the best technology to solve their problem.
I see.
Yeah.
So when you started Khanmigo, it was for what course was it for originally? Was it more broad, or was it like it was more targeted towards a specific course?
It was a general,
Subject?
yeah, it was just a general chatbot available, because so we did launch it as like a limited pilot, so it's
Yes.
not just available broadly for all users.
Right.
It was something where you had to opt in and pay for Khanmigo, and just acknowledge that you're like, this is an
beta.
early product, it's a beta.
Yeah.
And we're still like working through trying to learn as best we can. We've learned so much in the last year, and we've made it significantly better. But it really kind of, we launched it as a chatbot that did exist on any content page on Khan Academy, but we did build specialized experiences to make the math better.
I see.
So
Yes,
any,
because yes.
yes,
Do you want to
because
speak about that a little bit?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, large language models famously are not good at math, right? They're just predicting the next token.
Mhm.
And so we've done things like, when we detect that when there's math in the conversation, we'll actually defer to a calculator to do the calculations.
Yeah.
And so we'll like spin up something, do the calculation, send that information back to Khanmigo. So the other complicated part about doing tutoring is it's not just like doing the math correctly, but it's evaluating the student on every step, right? If you're working on a complicated math problem,
Right.
you kind of, if someone's not getting it, you have to break it down into smaller sub chunks.
Yes.
There's a technique called chain of thought prompting, where rather than just having the AI directly respond to the student, even with the calculator, we'll send a call to the AI that's private, that no one can see,
Okay.
which is basically like, okay, like think through why the student might have done that as a next step. Think through what you think should have happened as the next step.
Very cool.
And then we actually, so again, that's all hidden it's
Yes.
called AI thoughts.
Yes.
And we feed that to another call to the AI that says, hey, can you actually, using this information, can you now tutor the student?
Brilliant.
And that increased the accuracy rate of Khanmigo. So we were kind of doing experiments like that. We've just been, there's also just a game of whack-a-mole. Like, for instance, we were running into issues where sometimes Khanmigo would say like, a student would enter 0.25, and then Khanmigo would be like, oh no, you're wrong. But actually they're right, it's just that they didn't use the fraction form, right? 1/4.
Okay.
So
Yes.
again, that's why it's in a pilot. We were like seeing these things and
Yes.
iteratively fixing them and patching the holes over time.
So, on the whole, how much do you see people using the AI in their courses, versus the videos? Then there's AI accompaniment, and I'm assuming there's like lesson plans and tests and things like that. How heavily is AI used now? And is it used in a way that you find surprising?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think different kids will use it in whatever way they feel comfortable with.
It's like a chatbot interface.
It is a chatbot interface. We do have like speech to text and text to speech.
Nice.
If you, especially if you're a younger learner, it's just reading a lot of text can be challenging.
Oh, yeah.
So I think like depending on the user's needs, they use it, however much they'd like. And yeah, but we are seeing like quite a bit of usage in terms of like how many people who use it once kind of return and continue to use it again and get tutored. We're seeing it quite a bit. And then when it comes to teachers, we're seeing a lot of them, use tools like our lesson planning tool. And it's also, again, it's like integrated into our content. So it has access to all that information, and you can say like, yeah, help me write a lesson plan for this. And it just starts generating it for you on the fly. You can like highlight things and say, rewrite this or add this. And so quite a bit of usage for that as well. So yeah, it's been going really, really well. And we're hoping to launch into more districts in this coming back to school cycle.
Oh, so it's actually launched, as you said, in schools. So wow, I didn't realize that.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing. So I've been excited about AI, the intersection of AI and education for a while. So I love that Khan Academy is doing this, because I think there's an issue right now in schools, and I'm sure you guys have a similar philosophy, where kids learn in different ways. They have different learning styles. They are learning at different rates. And AI, I'm not sure if you're doing this yet, but I could see you doing it in the future, where you have your personalized bot that understands how you think, how you learn, and you're able to train it with your feedback. And the model will learn like, oh, I should explain it in this way versus this way, or, these kinds of graphs are helpful, or, everyone thinks in different ways.
Yeah.
And so then people can really learn at the pace that they can learn at, rather than being dragged along when they're not ready, or being, stuck at the front of where they are and wanting to go forward, but having to wait. And so I'm just so excited about this. And I love that you're launching with schools and that you have that kind of symbiotic relationship with the schools.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even before Khanmigo, we've always kind of actually had these categories of the just-in-time learner who's just learning something and they're studying for a test and they just need to know it, but they're maybe not that far behind. There's also kind of the race ahead learner, and then there's that student who has these like big learning gaps that have accumulated over time. And we've definitely been
so cool.
We care about all three of those scenarios, but like our bigger focus has been how do we fill in learning gaps for the students who, over time have kind of developed these Swiss cheese gaps in their knowledge that prevent them from being able to be successful in the, higher level courses. So that's something that we do. And in terms of that personalization, that's an area that we're heavily exploring. I mean, an example of that, a more basic example of that is we're also kind of analyzing every conversation and extracting insights from them. So anything that's going on, is available to teachers, including anything that might be, unsafe or like we have moderation features.
Great.
So if you say something that a teacher should know about, they'll get alerted.
Great.
But we're also, supplying them information like when did a student struggle on working through this with Khanmigo, and we're also doing things like extracting things that you care about. So if you say like, if you ask Khanmigo for a similar example, Khanmigo will actually first say, well, what are you interested in? And if you say like, I love soccer, then it might give you an example in relation to soccer, but then it remembers that. So the next time,
does it remember? Oh.
Yeah. So the next time you might ask for an example in another course, it'll just give it to you in that, use that.
So it kind of builds a profile on this person. So even once the, context is too long, it still always remembers this like profile on what the
which you as a user have full control over and can delete and turn it off if you don't want it as well.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. I love this. I was just talking to someone recently. He's new to AI. He's a scientist and he works on, reading papers and synthesizing information. And he was saying, he was using AI and he was like, I don't like this because just using a typical large language model. He's like, I don't like this because it just tells me the answer. Like I'll ask a question, it just tells me the answer. I don't learn. So much of learning is struggling, having a Swiss cheese gap that you don't even realize you have. And then like hitting that point where you're like, oh wait, and then you're building and you're struggling. I really like Khan Academy's approach because you have to learn and you have this where you get it wrong, you're still getting it wrong, you're still learning, and then the model is like, why did they get it wrong? And then that I think is potentially the future of learning on large language models is this kind of trial and error, because that's how you'll really remember it. Obviously some things you don't need to really remember, but I think it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time. I mean, again, I did not expect us to be in this position 2 years ago to be able to kind of build these experiences that we really think are going to be transformative in a lot of students' lives, especially those who, are just a bit more apprehensive to reach out and ask their teacher a question or, they kind of, everybody has this like initial ability to ask a question here. And then if they're really not getting it, raise their hand. And which is, even with Khan Academy before, that was always the idea, which is like, we're kind of giving everybody access to these like base lessons that if you didn't get a chance to, if you were sick for a week because of something and you missed out on some lessons, like you have Khanmigo, or if there was just something you zoned out in the middle of class, you have Khan Academy.
Yes.
And then now I think it's the same with just having a tutor that's always available, that has context of everything you've learned in the past, that, knows your interests, et cetera. Again, I don't think it's going to replace teachers. I know it's not going to replace teachers. And I think there's also going to be a place even just for the traditional tutor. But I think there's a lot of cases where, it's kind of be that first line of defense, and it's going to help for a lot of people.
Right. I don't see it replacing teachers either. I think we still need that. But this
and I raise that only because that's just a big fear, I think, that a lot of people have.
Totally. Yeah. And so can you actually go into that more? Like why don't you think it will replace teachers?
Why won't
it replace teachers?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it's because AIs are still not going to create as much of that personal connection with the student, right? Like teachers are kind of there to build those relationships. I can kind of think back to some of the best experiences that I ever had as a student. It was just like when you have that amazing teacher who you build a rapport with, and you don't want to do it just for yourself, but also for them. And I think, developing those relationships with AI is, maybe not the healthiest, or, depending on how someone builds the AI, but ultimately I think that, teachers are going to be there to really like motivate students, but
Yes.
me, because I think we're going to be able to like one thing I don't think these AIs are going to be able to do is things like project-based learning.
Right.
Like I think even though we do have these systems in place where we have standardized tests and you really have to learn these like isolated skills, sometimes the best way to learn a concept is not, through, the whole, like if you watch Karate Kid, like wax on, wax off, and then you eventually know all these moves. It doesn't really kind of work like that, right? Like sometimes you just learn the best by doing something that has an application, let's say of math.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, I'm going to learn that math along the way. I think back to my own education when I was learning calculus. Like I wish that I took a computer graphics course first, and then maybe I had to like intuitively figure out how to like render things, and then maybe you teach it with the calculus after. And so I actually think that teachers that's going to be a lot harder for an AI to do, like facilitate a classroom and get everyone kind of building these fun activities. And I just think it's going to unlock the ability to do more of that, more of the fun stuff that actually it's learning, but you don't even realize it's learning.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it'll help teachers be able to work with students who are able to catch up, and ask the little questions that they're like kind of caught on, and the teachers can focus on really bringing everyone together and like really having this super strong foundation on the material. And the kids who start to like have questions or fall behind will easily be able to catch up, and everyone, it's just like, I see it as this beautiful, cohesive environment in the classroom. It's so exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I also don't want us to get, at the end of the day, like it's not going to be perfect. There's still going to be, the hope is just that it reduces the rates of unfinished learning that we're seeing. I mean, one thing that we've seen just in the research is that kids who get to the 8th grade, by the time they're in the 8th grade, they're 1.1 grade levels behind on average. At least I think that's the kind of the stat that I've seen in the United States. And, how can we chip away at that? How can we reduce that? That's our goal. Like those kids who are falling behind, we don't want them to fall behind. And with the pandemic, that made things even worse. So anything we can kind of do to contribute to making that less of a problem would be super stoked about.
Stoked. I guess last question, where do you see Khanmigo and AI integrated in Khan Academy going in the next, timeline, 1 year, 5 years? If you can even think that far ahead. I know AI is kind of hard to predict, but if you guys have an idea of what you want to implement and what you see.
Oh, there's so much. I mean, one is just kind of, again, building in more of that kind of like that memory of what you've done in the past and injecting that into future conversations. So even though we're doing things like passing in your like, I like soccer, we want to do more of like extracting certain parts of conversations where you struggled, insert them in, and also add your skill profile. So like, where are you at for each individual skill in our kind of knowledge graph? So we want to be able to do a lot more of that, like, continuing to improve the personalization. But then I also think that there is just like iteration in like, at the end of the day, a lot of it is just pretty text heavy back and forth, which can be a lot for a lot of students. And when you see the new tools like GPT-4o, that's like multimodal natively, and it has that ability to kind of converse very naturally. We think that could be a game changer as well. I mean, that'll be interesting because in classrooms, you don't want everyone talking out loud of their AI. So we want to explore like how might that work in a classroom, but we also think there's a lot of potential there for kind of these more like natural language-based conversations. Again, as kind of like the first line of defense to help you if you're struggling or if you're at home and you don't have access to someone who can help you with your homework, et cetera. So cool. I think there's a lot of technological revolutions that are about to come out that we're going to continue to like incorporate and try. But then there's even with the current technology, we have a long ways to go to kind of iterate towards building an amazing experience. And it's, I think it's pretty great right now, but I think there's a lot more we can do.
I just had this vision of kids in class with headphones and like this device that doesn't exist yet, where you can speak into like a cone and talk with your AI, and everyone's sitting in their classroom and no one can hear it.
It just sucks in the
sound. And then you just take off your headphones if you need to talk to the teacher. That'd be so cool.
Yeah.
Such an amazing feature.
Another thing that we are definitely kind of exploring is like, how do we just engage whole classrooms more, where maybe like there's an activity where like the whole classroom is chatting with the AI at the same time, and maybe even scenarios where Khanmigo kind of notices like, hey, your 5 kids over here were struggling with, division, and so let's like group them into the corner and like have them do a group session with the AI or something like that. There's a lot of really exciting things that we want to try, and really it's just like every product company, it's just a question of prioritization and
Totally.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, what you guys are doing at Khan Academy is just phenomenal. I have chills thinking about the work that you guys are doing to help education in the United States. It's could be improved a lot. And thank you for the work that you're doing and for AI and learning. What an exciting area to be in. So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Shawn. And
Yeah, of course.
thanks for coming with us. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the fair.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is a great chat.
Okay, so Shawn and I were talking after the interview and we got really deep into this conversation, and we discussed that you guys are coming out with a tutoring accuracy benchmark. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think it's super exciting.
Yeah. So I mean, basically when you kind of think about like how are these, when these models are getting released into the wild, there's these different benchmarks that'll grade on how good is a model at doing math or reasoning, et cetera. And so it kind of has these like this benchmark data set of, it can kind of check whether or not it's right or wrong at X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
But there's nothing really out there that says like, let's grade how well a model is at being accurate at tutoring.
Right.
So we've been kind of building up that data set over time through all these conversations we've been having throughout the pilot of Khanmigo over the course of the last year. And now we have quite a kind of big data set of information, and we're taking a lot of those kind of conversations, anonymizing them.
Yes.
Because, and they're not from districts. They're just from our kind of independent grassroots learners who are kind of opted into the system. And we're taking those, anonymizing those conversations, but we're making them kind of, putting them into this like public data set for any model creator who then is making a model in the future. They'll be able to check, like, let's grade it now against how well it does at Khan Academy's tutoring accuracy benchmark.
Yes.
And, ideally if they see that their score went down, they'll be like, oh, what's going on there? Like, let's make sure that like we launch something that scores really well in this, because we want our models to be really awesome at tutoring. So that's something I think we're really excited about, because it's really going to help push the industry forward.
Gotcha. So it's a data set, but then do you also have a held out private test set that no one can see?
Yes. Yeah. A lot, because it's actually quite a bit of work to anonymize a conversation. And so we have a much larger kind of set of conversations that are not shared for privacy reasons. And we are continuing to, every time there's a new model that comes out, we're interested in seeing how good of a job does it do at tutoring.
Yes.
And that's just one element. So like we do a really rigorous job with this, because for us, math and teaching math is our bread and butter. But we also, we're building data sets for a whole bunch of the other experiences, data sets for how good it does at lesson planning and writing a story, crafting a story, and all these things. So that's, that's pretty standard practice, I think, for people building products. But when it comes to math and kind of tutoring in particular, it's something that's just been like the biggest area of focus that I think we're really leading the industry in right now.
It's so exciting. So as people develop these models, you'll be able to take the best tutoring models for different things, and you'll be able to release new benchmarks about, as you said, story writing. And it's so exciting. We're going to have all these educational models, and you guys can just continuously take the ones that perform the best for your students.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think there'll always be a combination of like, we're still going to want the generalized models to be able to grade how good of a job they do at tutoring.
Yes.
But there is also this, for instance, we're actually partnering with Microsoft right now, where they're building a specialized kind of small to medium sized model called Phi.
Okay.
And it's specific for math tutoring. So it's like a lot less parameters, a lot cheaper. And the idea there is if we can kind of use that, but it's just as good at kind of tutoring as some other, like these large language models, then we can kind of bring Khanmigo to more users. So that's something we're actively working with them on. We're not giving them any of our kind of data to train, just because of like our policies and whatnot. But they are going to be able to use our benchmark to grade how well their models are doing. And I think that should end up being in the report that we're going to share. Like, we're writing a paper alongside of releasing this tutoring accuracy benchmark. Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited to see it. I'll take a look at the paper.
Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. Two people on our team have been, driving that, Pepper and our chief learning officer, Kristen, and they're just doing an amazing job. And tons of other people have been supporting with kind of reviewing it and reviewing the benchmark. It's been a huge team effort. They're amazing.
Thank you so much for your work. Say thank you to the team for me.
All right, we'll do.
Shout out to the team if you're watching this.